Maxime Bernier's former girlfriend, Julie Couillard, first caught the public's attention last summer when she accompanied Bernier at his swearing-in as Foreign Affairs Minister. Today, Couillard's alleged ties in the 1990s to biker gangs and organized crime dominated the headlines. Couillard has no criminal record, but she was formerly married to a member of a gang linked to the Hells Angels and lived with another biker turned informant who was killed in a biker war. Bernier has listed her as his official traveling companion on foreign trips, including one to Afghanistan. He says he only recently learned of Couillard's past through the media. The Prime Minister weighed in.
I hear that one of my cabinet ministers has an ex-girlfriend. It's none of my business. It's none of Mr. Ducep's business, none of Mr. Dion's business. Mr. Ducep and Mr. Dion are quite a group of gossipy old busybodies.
Questions about ministerial judgment and national security are not a private matter. They are everyone's business, and we will raise them in this House.
This is about my private life, the private life in the past of my ex-girlfriend. People's private lives are none of your business.
This is not just a private matter. There's a pattern of embarrassment in the conduct of this Minister of Foreign Affairs. And now we learn that he failed to disclose potential security problems with a private relationship. Based on this record of embarrassment, I ask again, how can the government have confidence in this Minister of Foreign Affairs?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you'd agree that if this House of Commons lowered itself to spending its days inquiring into the private lives of the members, this country would be a much sadder place. And as for the national security concerns from the opposition, I could take those a little more seriously if they hadn't spent the entire leaders' round yesterday asking the government to bring 2 suspected terrorists back to Canada. Obviously, they don't really care about security concerns for Canada. They're really just in the gutter.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Minister of Foreign Affairs has access to some of the highest security clearance available to the cabinet member. Would you ask the Minister of Environment to settle down, please? This is an important matter. To achieve this security clearance, the minister would have to submit to a thorough background check. Did he list the woman he called his spouse, Julie Couillard, on his security clearance background check? And were any concern raised about his involvement with Ms. Couillard at that time? That's a simple question.
I think it's quite clear that these are politically motivated personal attacks on someone's private life that have no place in this House of Commons. A party leader who's normally in this House who said it just last year that I'd be very pleased to see less personal attacks, less low politics. That was the leader of the Liberal Party. Clearly, he's not leading his party today.
Mr. Speaker, contrary to what the government benches say, questions of ministerial judgment and national security can never be private questions in the House of Commons. This is the court of public opinion. This is where we need to ask those questions. So I want to hear from the Minister of Public Safety. Did he ever meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Ms. Couillard?
I'm really saddened and surprised that the Liberal Party continues to... I should confess, I'm not surprised that the Liberal Party continues to engage in deep personal attacks that are not matters of government business. If anybody's judgment as to their personal partners is something that people disagree with, I don't think that's a matter of government business. If we're going to spend the time in this House of Commons inquiring into people's personal lives, I think people can conclude that whatever politicians are engaging in that are entirely wasting the taxpayers' money and aren't fit for public office.
A cabinet minister having a relationship with someone who has contact with biker gangs is absolutely a question of national interest, ought to be answered in this House. And let me ask a question, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Minister of Public Safety, did he ever discuss Ms. Couillard's background with the Minister of Foreign Affairs? This is a question that needs to be answered here and now.
This is a question that shouldn't be answered here. It shouldn't be asked here. It shouldn't be asked now. It shouldn't be dealt with ever in this kind of forum.
Private lives are not the business of this House, but issues that do affect potentially the public security of Canada must be discussed here, and the answers should be very straightforward, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister of Foreign Affairs tell us if his former personal friend has ever had access, even inadvertently, to any official briefing materials of the Government of Canada?
I'm not going to inquire into the private conversations they have with their spouses. I'm not sure why anything that goes on between partners, why these kind of personal relationships are a matter of public business. I don't understand, Mr. Speaker, why you're even allowing these questions.
The honourable member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, this is not about Madame Couillard. This is about national security.
Order. Order. The honourable member for Wascana has the floor. Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Order. We'll have some order. The member for Wascana has the floor. We'll want to hear the question. Order. Order.
Mr. Speaker, this is a fundamental issue of democracy. And if the government is not prepared to let the people of Canada have their say and ask decent, legitimate questions, then this government stands exposed as a government that is denying fundamental democracy in this country. Mr. Speaker, I insist on the right to ask a legitimate question.
These questions, in my view, are in order. If we want to have an argument about it later, questions about national security are legitimate questions. Members may not like the references. I'm not saying I do either. That's not my business. The question is whether the question deals with government matter. These questions, the way they're being phrased so far, are dealing with a matter of the government.
This is not indeed about Ms. Couillard. This is about national security, and that is the business of this House. Will the Minister of Foreign Affairs simply assure the House that his former friend did not travel with him to sensitive foreign locations in the Middle East, for example, or to Camp Mirage near Dubai?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
These questions do not constitute what he described to this House a moment ago as decent questions. This entire line of questioning is indecent. I know, Mr. Speaker, you said that he had the floor. In my opinion, he has the sub-basement.
The NDP leader said the whole thing is a waste of time.
It certainly wasn't the most edifying question period in the history of this Parliament or of the Canadian House.
The government line today was that his personal life is no one's business. Do you believe that's true without exception when you're a politician?
Not without exception, but certainly in this case, I mean, you know, obviously there can be times when your personal life does intersect with your public life. For example, if there may be a conflict of interest or something like that. But in this case, I think this is entirely a private matter of actually a private citizen. You know, nobody's accused Maxime Bernier of doing anything improper or out of line. And the woman in question, she's never been convicted of anything. And I think this is the official commencement of silly season in the House of Commons.
But if she were still active in the biker community, and I'm not saying she is, and I'm not sure there's any proof either way on that, would that not be worrisome in a relationship with a cabinet minister?
Well, interesting hypothetical, but obviously I'm not going to respond to a hypothetical. You can direct all kinds of hypotheticals where there might be a problem. In this case, there's no problem. This is an ex-girlfriend who 10 years ago, it's alleged, may have had some involvement. I don't know. I've never met her, and frankly, it's none of my business, none of yours, and I don't think Canadians particularly care.
I'd like to say to the government House Leader that if he would simply respond in the affirmative, that the government has every intention of ensuring that in fact there is no security problem or security issue with respect to the situation facing the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I'm sure that would go a long way to satisfying members of the House that in fact the appropriate steps have been taken.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, this government takes very seriously national security issues. We don't see that asking questions about the private lives of ministers in the fashion that the opposition has fits that bill.
Unfortunately, the Prime Minister's office, they seem to care more about what she was wearing at the cabinet swearing in than what her background was. And I think that was someone was really asleep on the switch on that.
No one is interested in prying into anyone else's private affairs. However, there is a concern that has been raised because, let's face it, the Hells Angels, some of these gangs, they're pretty nasty people. And they would not necessarily be ones to refuse an opportunity, for example, to have a contact who might actually look through the Minister of Foreign Affairs briefcase, other documents, etc. So we're not saying it happened. No one is saying that, but there is a perception and a concern of a national security issue potentially.
In this issue, you know, and particularly when you're looking at security, you start drawing some dotted lines. Canada is at war in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the largest producer of opium in the world. The bikers have long been associated with drugs in Canada. Now, you know, are those real connections? You know, who knows? But it is a question about security, and I mean, there's nothing to substantiate that.
Yesterday, I just stood outside the House, you know, at the fringe of the scrums, and there seemed to be kind of this hysterical, panicked edge in the air, and it all told me that something about this story bothers the Conservatives. They don't like this story. They were doing damage control like crazy on it, and that in itself tells me that it may be our business.
When she got out of the car, the swearing in, I thought, you know, who's that? That his girlfriend, his
wait,
sister, his cousin? You know,
we all asked the same question. We had no idea.
You had no idea she was that.
And she did attract a little bit of attention, including from the PMO, that was quite concerned that her dress was not appropriate. But as we were kidding around in the office today, they were worried that her dress was too revealing. Well, maybe they should have been checking to make sure she wasn't covering up a wire.
Do you think that this is going? So why did it come out now, do you think? I mean, if people knew that she'd been involved.
Everybody knew about that story for. The first time I heard about the story, maybe 2 months ago, and people knew before that, and Gilles Duceppe knew before that, and the Liberals, Denis Coderre, knew before that, all journalists knew before that. Nobody knew exactly what to do with that story. It was sort of a complicated story. The girl never been accused of anything. Should you condemn her because she was associated with bikers in the past? Does it mean that she can't, you know, see whoever she wants to see? There was no criminal activities in the past of anybody, but, you know, that's why I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that story.
There have been suggestions that Bloc MPs were calling reporters and saying, when are you going to do this story? That report, as Rob says, many of us have known about this for weeks. We've heard the rumors about it. Is that a part of this story, Chris?
Yeah, our colleague James Cudmore focused on that particular aspect today. It was known, certainly in political circles, and there was lots of interest. The Bloc Québécois, shortly after the question was asked of Gilles Duceppe, after question period, suddenly was releasing all sorts of documentation that they had compiled about this woman, yet never themselves raised it in question period. So I guess the issue, if you want to look at it from the other prism, is if it was such an issue of national security, how come no political party was prepared to raise it in the House of Commons until finally a journalist asked them?
This has been talked about for months, about doubts or questions or whatever. And this only came out because one media outlet decided to take the lead, and then everyone followed in the media and made this a public story, but that the opposition parties didn't raise it until the media raised it. What does that say?
You know, when I look at this issue, I guess it's sad in a way, because at a time when the political culture of the United States seems to be changing, seems to be getting out of that, what I call the muck of personal politics, this is an indication, I hope the other parties steer away from it, that we're going to that place. And I respect Ms. Findlay's point of view that they're really not trying to do that. But in the way this story came out, and this is worthy of underlining, you've already said it, why didn't any of the opposition parties, including our own,
want to go forward with this
then
issue?
Bring it forward. And the reality is, and it's the elephant in the room, is that they didn't want to do it because they'd be accused of the very accusation that's being put forward by some, that is, you're not really interested in the issue itself, you're interested in scoring points. I have concerns about Mr. Bernier. I've been very clear. But when we start to descend into this kind of politics, I think it's a place we don't want to go. And we, as a party, we're not going there. As an MP, I'm definitely not going there.
And let's just mention, in my question, Monsieur Crête, this all came out when the media decided to go with it.
Yeah, but it was shopped around.
Yeah.
This afternoon, I received and I accepted Minister Bernier's resignation from the cabinet. Minister Bernier has learned and informed me that he left classified government documents in a non-secure location. This is a serious error. The minister has accepted his responsibilities in offering to resign.
Prime Minister, he's admitted to saying that the documents were in a non-secure location, but surely there are other issues at play here with Madame Couillard going on TVA this evening and the allegations that she was involved with organized crime and bidding on government contracts for airport security. I mean, was that what really was the final straw?
No, this is about one thing, and that is a failure to uphold expected standards on government documents. It is a very serious mistake, regardless of who the minister is. regardless of personal life, to leave classified documents in an unsecure location. This is a serious error. The minister has recognized this error himself and offered to resign. Let me just be very clear about this. This is not to do with the minister's private life or the life of a private citizen, 99% of which I think is completely off bounds. I don't think it matters who a minister is dating. I don't think it matters anything about the private life of some private citizen. What matters here is that rules respecting government classified documents were broken. It obviously was not done on purpose. It was a mistake, but it doesn't matter. It was clearly done. And that has to be treated appropriately. There are precedents, and this obviously is a warning to all ministers. I thank Minister Bernier for recognizing the error himself.
How disappointed were you to learn that this had happened? How long ago did he know? Had he known for weeks that this had happened and just hadn't told you?
First of all, obviously, I'm very disappointed. I'm obviously very disappointed for the government, disappointed for Maxime. I think it's very unfortunate. Maxime became aware of this. He told me late last evening and informed me, as I say, this afternoon. And so we spent the last couple of hours, I accepted his resignation right away, and we've spent the last couple of hours putting the mechanisms in place for the transition.
I've had a document, and what happened is that Maxime came to my house, and the document in question was left at my house.
What kind of document?
And for now, what I can tell you about this is that that document made me very uncomfortable, and I was referred to a top lawyer in that field to tell me how to react and what to do. What was the proper legal thing, the proper legal procedures in a situation like that. And I proceeded, I was told by my lawyer that the document in question was the property of our government and it had to be returned to them.
Will the government confirm that the documents that lay around Julie Couillard's room for 5 weeks were classified briefing notes relating to the Bucharest summit and our mission in Afghanistan? Will the government then explain why it took them 5 weeks to realize the documents were missing? And finally, will the government explain how the Prime Minister, who's now in Paris, is going to explain to President Sarkozy of France that Canada can still be trusted with confidential information?
There were a number of questions included there that 35 seconds don't give me time to answer. However, I will say that in terms of the documents, if they want to hear the answer, they can listen to it. If they don't want to hear the answer, they can keep talking, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this is the conduct that has left the reputation of this government in tatters.
As for the content of the documents, I think we're all aware now that those were a mix of publicly available documents as well as some classified documents. They were all, of course, in preparation for the NATO summit in Bucharest. I hear again, they don't want to hear the answer, but I'm not surprised. I will not, however, discuss classified documents in the House.
Why did it take the government 5 weeks to discover the documents were missing? And why did it take the government 5 weeks to ask a question either of the member from Beauce, the former minister, or of Madame Couillard? Why do you sit on your duffs and do nothing for 5 weeks about an
this government, as soon as we became aware, either they want to hear answers or they want to make funny speeches. It's a question period. I'm here to answer.
My sixth sense, I knew, I could feel it, that I was watched, I was listened to.
Of particular interest to Nadeau and others in the security business, Couillard's claimed that someone bugged her bed.
There was apparently some in my box spring of my mattress in my bedroom.
Prime Minister, Ms. Couillard in her interview last night raised new issues, gave new information that had nothing to do with the documents that you mentioned at your 7 o'clock statement, nor does it seem to be about her personal life per se. What more needs to be done to get to the bottom of this so that Canadians can feel confident.
To the bottom of what, Keith?
To the bottom of the things that she said. For instance, for example, she said that she believed after experts had been through her house to sweep it, I think is the term, that bugs had been planted in the house, microphones and so on. Do you take these things seriously?
I have absolutely no information that would suggest that's true. I have no reason to believe it's true either.
Thank you very much, everybody.
No, absolutely no reason to believe it's true. And as we've said, private lives are private lives, and the Government of Canada does not intend to get into the business of investigating private citizens.
If there was a bug, then the question becomes whose bug was it? So either she was a security risk, as the opposition has been claiming, or the government got cold feet about whether or not she was a security risk and then planted the bug themselves. Either way, but you have the possibility of bugging of cabinet ministers' girlfriends. I mean, this is pretty wild stuff.
If everything was secure, I want to know two things. A, do we have some transcript from the bug? And secondly, what kind of assurance that we can get that those documents has not been photocopied and distributed to the organized crime?
Either the bug were legal or they were not. If they were legal, they were bugged. She was bugged by the RCMP or the SCRS, the Secret Service. And if that is true, then they must have a warrant from the court. And it shows that the RCMP found that Mrs. Couillard should be investigated more, contrary to what the Prime Minister said. If the bug was illegal, well, but it's anybody who could see that, who could think that putting a bug in Ms. Couillard's bedroom will draw enough evidence for the trouble it is to place a bug in her house. Because I would imagine nobody is stupid enough to put a bug just under her bed. So it was just one of the bug, I suppose, that was there.
I think that Serge Menard's intervention just now shows the difference between our parties. Mr. Menard is talking about the bug, whether it was legal or illegal. What Madame Couillard in fact said last night, what she in fact,
okay, Serge, let Thomas speak and then I'll come back.
What she in fact said during her interview last night was that she had brought in an expert who said that there was a hole in her sommier, her box spring. And that hole, according to the person she said she spoke to, might have been a bug. There's no bug that's been found in her apartment at all. And that's a perfect example of what this is about, Don. It becomes real. Mr. Menard is talking about the bug as if it was real and that there might be others. There isn't even one bug. Never mind a question of whether it was there legally or illegally. There's an affirmation of someone that they talked to someone and that other person said that there might be one. That's what this has been about. This has been about something taking off. Canada does have a problem in foreign affairs. We had a minister who was clearly not competent for the job. The NDP was the first party to stand up here in this foyer and ask for his departure as minister. That has not changed. We're glad that he's gone.
The problem is that these are her allegations. No evidence have been presented. No listening device have been found. And from a professional organization, the fact that you go and bug a bed, you put a listening device in the bed, on the bed frame, in the headboard, into the furnitures, even the wall if you want to, but not the mattress.
Too much fabric in a bed for good audio. A professional would rather bug the light switch or the phone, where an electrical charge powers the bug. Her whole story is hard to believe, says Nadeau.
Cannot say it's impossible, but I'm skeptical.
We've been led to believe that more was happening behind the scenes than has been admitted by this government. And I want to ask the Public Safety Minister, can the Public Safety Minister confirm that between May 1st and May 8th of this year, there was a meeting of CSIS and the Prime Minister's office to discuss the conduct of his Foreign Affairs Minister?
I hope the member opposite isn't so naive as to think that meetings between CSIS members and the Prime Minister on any subject would be a matter of total public record. Mr. Speaker, how naive is he being?
It's absolutely a legitimate question. So I ask again, was there a meeting between May 1st and May 8th of this year between the Prime Minister's office and CSIS?
Apparently is absolutely ignorant of items related to security of this nation. It would not be, nor should it be, nor will it be the policy of any Prime Minister to be publicly talking about meetings he or she may or may not have had with members of CSIS.
What this minister is now saying is absolute hogwash. The fact is the Prime Minister's office met with CSIS to discuss the former Foreign Affairs Minister. Why wouldn't he say whether or not a meeting took place? Did that meeting take place or not?
Mr. Speaker, it's very clear when you've lost a point in debate, the only way you can possibly recover is try and get enough froth going so it makes it look like you still have a point. Once he's calmed down and eased off the caffeine a little bit, he'll recognize that as Attorney General in the province from which I come from, there is no way in the world he would be publicizing meetings, any kinds of meetings, when it comes to items of security and with agencies of security. He knew that then, he knows that now, and he's just playing a silly game right now.
Who told you this? Look, we have our sources. I mean, I'm telling you, we've been led to believe that there was a meeting. Sources within what? We have sources that tell us.
Are they security sources?
Look, we have sources. We've been led to believe that there was a meeting between CSIS and the Prime Minister's office to discuss the matters involving Mr. Bernier. And that is very clear in terms of the information we received.
Qualify the credibility of that source.
How credible is your source? Well, you know, I believe, look, I have been led to believe there was a meeting.
You've been saying all along, Mr. DeSange,
that the PMO. Who from the PMO do you
think was there?
Well, like, I'm not going to think anything. All I'm telling you, there was a meeting between CSIS and the Prime Minister's office between May 1st and May 8th. We've been led to believe that.
Did you talk to someone at the meeting?
We've been led to believe we have been led to believe there was a meeting between the Prime Minister's office and CSIS to discuss Mr. Bernier and his problems.
What's your understanding?
My understanding is that the meeting was to discuss concerns about Mr. Bernier. Beyond that, you should ask the Public Safety Minister whether or not that's true.
Today, even the country's spy service was dragged into the story. Liberals suggesting that CSIS held secret meetings with the Prime Minister's office over security concerns. That led to a flurry of denials from the Prime Minister's office, from Stockwell Day's office, and a rare statement from CSIS itself saying, quote, CSIS has no role in this case, period.
The government would appear mistaken if it believed Bernier's leaving would bring an end to the speculation surrounding it. With every passing day, with every refusal by the government to stray from its talking points, suspicion about what led to Bernier's downfall only grows.
Did Couillard obtain a special diplomatic passport which requires extra security checks to travel with the former minister?
If she passes the official spouse and she's going all over the world with the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, it means that she might detain that passport, Mr. Speaker. Right. So the question is simple, because it has an impact on the diplomatic venture. We want to know if yes or no she was detaining a green passport. That's simple as that. Yeah. She was supposed to be there officially for the past year. We want to have an answer, and we want it now.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment on whether any individual had or didn't have a passport. I will observe, though, the following, that to obtain a diplomatic passport, one has to be legally married or in a legally recognized common law relationship. That is a legal status. And in the case of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, at no time that he was Minister of Foreign Affairs was he legally married or in a legally recognized common law spousal relationship.
Why is it important, Ruby Dalla, whether we find out whether Julie Couillard actually had a special passport?
I think given her background, it is incredibly important. It's important for Canadians to know these answers. It's important in regards to our national security as a country. I mean, we have had a lot of questions and this government has provided absolutely no answers. I'm sure you know, Mike, that this story has appeared in over 68 countries. I think we tracked this morning over 2,800 newspapers around the world with different commentary of what's happened with the Foreign Affairs Minister. Canada, once known and prided for its it's a champion of human rights and democracy and peace. We've become the laughing stock overnight, and let me tell you, Canadians are quite concerned with this track record of this government.
All those newspapers, Ms. Dalla, let me assure you, just wanted an opportunity to run the picture that we just saw.